Here's Mark and Suzanne revolutionizing radio.
Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Mark and Suzanne Show. I am Mark and she is Suzanne, and we're glad you joined us here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we are revolutionizing radio. And why do we say we're revolutionizing radio? Because it actually needs to be revolutionized. It's largely pablum today. So we're glad you joined us here. We've got a lot of topics to cover. We're going to be appealing to some very controversial issues, but they really shouldn't be controversial issues. Sadly, they are. We hope you'll stick around and listen and entertain our ideas, because in so many cases, most of the ideas you'll hear on this show, here on the Cerberus Radio Network, are ideas that are sourced in history, things we've actually done before, and led to a great deal of freedom. We're going to get back to those times, folks, and you need to be part of it. But right now, let me bring on our co-host, Suzanne. How are you doing today, Suzanne?
I'm doing well. We have a little bit of snow on the ground out here in Utah. Fortunately, it's going to melt this week. I'm not quite ready to be buried for the rest of the season yet, but it's great to be here. I love when the four of us can all get together. Jeff Johnson here is producing the show. We have Greg Junk von Carpenter. He is going to be chiming in as well here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. I want you to keep in mind one of the phrases that we also used when we started this show. We called it 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers. Mark, you mentioned these times that they had these discussions, the ideas that were dominating the discussion back then. We need to bring those to the forefront now. I refer to that book frequently. You got me into this, Rethinking the American Union for the 21st Century. I had a wonderful opportunity, we'll share later in the show, to meet some very liberty-minded, patriotic ladies, and I dropped a few truth bombs on them this week. But the goal is to really expand this message into getting away from saving the House this November election. We've got to save ourselves, folks. Not the Republican Party. We're not going to save ourselves looking to these victories. We're going to ask later in the show, what have we accomplished by having a Republican House, Senate, White House, and now more Republican appointed members on the Supremist Court, I calls them. So, want to encourage you also, follow us on Facebook. Follow Mark Kreslin's posts. All your stuff is public. They are very, very thought-provoking. The discussions are good. Not everybody agrees with you.
No.
But sometimes what we say is difficult for people to hear at first. And to what I said to some of these ladies I got to meet the other day, bear with me. Hear me out. They were very eager to listen to resources that I would suggest, the books that we read. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from them and being involved with them. We also have a SoundCloud page. You can go and hear our shows, download them for free, share them. Please subscribe. We also have a YouTube page, all of this Cerberus Radio Network. I know Jeff posts our Radio Co. link, and we have programming going on 24/7 for that. The Mark and Suzanne Show, the Wasatch Report, case in point. We have Mike Meharry's podcast. Listen to the stuff he's also done recently with Schiff Gold and the prognostications he had that were accurate to within about a day of the sell-off we had on the stock market. So, folks, I told these ladies when they said, what can we do? I said, first and foremost, stop listening to Levin.
Yes.
Because, Mark, I'm going to let you run with that. What is to be accomplished if we listen to these big government, Hannity, Levin, Rush? What are we going to accomplish if we follow that line of thought?
Well, we're going to accomplish exactly the same thing, which is eventually going to lead to the loss of all liberty and freedom, folks. These guys have no plans, none. They have not had plans for 30 years. And to be fair, I used to be in that group of people and thinkers. I used to think that the most important thing could ever happen was getting the GOP or conservatives into power in Washington, D.C. So to be fair, I was from that point of view at one point. I have dramatically changed, and my whole change came from an article really began with Dr. Walter Williams back in 1999, writing an article titled "It's Time to Part Company." In this article, he argued that there needs to be an amicable divorce, and I have never looked back since that time. I began to really investigate a lot of what I had come to understand about government. A lot of what I understood, even working there on Capitol Hill as a senior legislative assistant for Congressman George Wortley from upstate New York and Congressman Richard Baker from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I was in the belly of the beast. And at that time, I thought that's just how we do things. It's just how it goes. And yet also at the same time, getting this unsettling feeling that all of you have. And that is why you tune into this show, because you have the same unsettling feeling we have, that nothing is working out right, that it's just getting worse. It's getting progressively worse. And we're also seeming to get to the point now where we are grasping at straws for ideas to fix it. So what has been the latest straw, if you will, that is going to fix everything? Well, Donald Trump. Now, to be fair to Trump, I will always call balls and strikes with him. When he does great things, I will be the first to stand up there and applaud it. When he cut back the regulatory garbage that comes out of these agencies, you had a repeal to get one through. I applauded that. That's a good thing. But at the same time, when he's not doing the right thing, I'm going to call him on that, because I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I actually wrote in on my ballot, I don't consent, because I backed up what my beliefs were with my actions in a very small way. I said, I don't consent to Washington, D.C. in toto. I don't. It's a horrible design, but there's very few people out there that are quote unquote leaders who are willing to say that, but that's exactly what needs to be said. So when you tune into Levin, when you tune into Limbaugh, when you tune into Hannity, Laura Ingraham, Glenn Beck, it doesn't matter. They're all going to usually use the same kind of reasoning. Well, if we just get back to the Constitution, they're living in some la-la land on that. The Constitution was obliterated in 1794. Folks, these are just facts. You cannot dispute my fact base on this.
And these are not our opinions.
No, they're not.
History is backing up every claim we make on here. We're not making our opinions. Well, this is the type of government we think is best. We are saying, what is the type of government that was consented to? And Greg has a question he wants to ask. But before I bring him in, I want to address the issue of consent. And I actually mentioned you in the conversation I had with these young ladies, because I said, listen, when you talk about how important it is to maintain the House, my good friend and co-host Mark Kreslins was a senior legislative assistant, and he told me firsthand these representatives never even saw the letters that are written to them. No. So why don't you just share for a moment, how representative are these people? Who is influencing them? And then we'll bring Greg on to ask the question.
Oh, that's a great point. And this is where I'm glad that I had the experience that I did working up in there in Congress. Worked for two different offices, one from upstate New York, left there, and then went and worked in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The same thing happens in every office up there. Constituent A will write a letter. It'll go to the chief of staff, the administrative assistant. He or she will look at the letter and they make a calculation. Is this person a donor? Well, that letter goes to the congressman or the legislative director. But which is, not the majority of letters we got. The majority of them were just good, well-meaning people back in the district. And so the AA would then put on top of the letter what was the topic area and then distribute them to us, the legislative assistants. So I'd get my stack of letters every morning, or faxes or phone calls. And then my day is busy. I'm watching hearings all day. I'm paying it. I managed one of my boss's congressional committees. So I had to pay attention to what was going on in the committee. I had to talk with committee staff all the time. Pieces of legislation were moving through there. The legislative director, Ed, he was doing the same thing. So we were wildly busy just trying to keep our heads above water on policy that was going through the committee. Never mind, we had to pay attention to policies that were going through on the House floor that were not in his committee, but he had to vote on. So we're scrambling all day, just trying to keep our heads above water with this stupid government that's flying through all kinds of pieces of legislation, trying to understand them, how they impact our district. And then that stack sits there. And then by about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, I realized I've got to start answering these constituents. So I take out letter A and I search. Back then, we had very minimal search capabilities on our computers. I search my computer for something he may have spoken on, he may have said that's relevant to the topic. Let's say it was the environment. Well, Richard gave a speech at a Rotary Club down in Baton Rouge, and he mentioned the word environment, and it came up in the search window. And so I would read it. I'd grab a sentence or two out of it. I'd throw it in the letter. I would say, thank you for this most important question you're asking. Back in June or whatever it was, I spoke on this most important issue to you and to our district. And I'd weave in some comments from his speech. And then I'd say, and thank you again for contacting me. Please know that when I go to the house, I almost said whorehouse, when I go to the house and vote on this.
Swerve into the truth.
No kidding. Freudian flip, right? And then I would say, and please know that when I go to the floor to vote on this most important issue to you, I will vote with your thoughts in mind. Sincerely, Richard A. Baker, member of Congress. And then you see my little initial, you see RHB/MK. I wrote that letter. He never saw it.
Mark, I was looking at something else where you were doing that. And I thought, did I miss the part where you said you walked into his office with the letter and discussed this with him?
Yeah, I said that. You must have missed that part. No. And this is it. And then it's even worse. Not only did Richard never see it, not only did I never ask him about it, I went upstairs. There's little cages up at the top of the house office buildings you're in. And in those, every office has
cages.
No kidding. It's an attic. It's dusty and there's rats up there and mice. And so you go up there and no kidding. Every member of Congress has a cage up there. And in each cage is what's called a signing machine. Now, this is a mechanical apparatus that has a pen in it. And they have duplicated Richard's signature so that you would slide the letter in there and you'd line it up, right under the signature field, and you'd press the button and it would sign Richard H. Baker. He never signed these things. When we finally got digital signatures in our computers, oh my gosh, we never had to go upstairs again. We just pressed print, we'd put his signature right in there. He never saw it, folks. And that's just, I could tell you stories that would make your skin crawl if you knew how corrupt I was, how corrupt we all were up there. It is a den of thieves. It is filled rampant with evil. And I saw it firsthand. This is why part of the reason I do some of the things I do now. Why do you think I call this thing an evil institution? Why do you think I suggest we line up 10,000 bulldozers on 16th Street there and push the whole doggone thing right into the Chesapeake? Because I was there. I was there. It is bad. Greg?
Wake up, Greg. All this time, you wake up and I think pouting.
I think he froze there. So, folks, I'm glad I have the experience that I do because I was able to see this firsthand, and I can share it with you. You do not want this. Do not make arguments about if they would just obey stop saying that. They're not going to. Let me give you another example. In my time there, not once ever did, when we were getting our congressmen to co-sponsor something, to sponsor something, to vote for something, never did I didn't even own a Constitution. We didn't pull out the Constitution and start thumbing through it and say, oh, do we have the authority? That's just not how the game is played. Don't listen to your congressman coming back and say, if you vote for me, I will go up there and defend He doesn't even know what the Constitution means.
Mark,
stop saying it.
When I have these conversations too, I mean, somebody on my Facebook page has said, we have to believe in something.
Yeah.
Why? There are so many other things we could believe in. And one of the other documents that we refer people to is, instead of we the people, let's look at when in the course of human events, folks, look at the principles set forth in the Declaration of Independence. Yep. And I want to see if Junkbon's ready to chime in now. Some time ago, he said he had a question. Hello, Greg.
I does have a question. My question is this, Mr. Kreslins, after 35 years of talking on the radio, what has Rush Limbaugh, Hannity, and Levin actually accomplished in the way for quote, conservatism.
I know, Greg. This is it, and yet they make $100 million a year, $20 million a year,
because that's what people want to believe in. Somebody who's going to talk about something.
Yeah. Yes. And in the meantime, Greg, what is going on right now? A revolution is going on right in our midst, right in front of us. And yet, like you just said, we gain comfort from hearing nostalgic ideas or big ideas as somehow this person, if we get him into the White House, or this group of people, if we get him into the House, gumdrops and butter and lollipops are going to fall down from the sky.
People believe that the last time that they had a Republican in, things were better. That's what they believe. And psychologically speaking, over time, you know how you have very few memories of bad things that happened in your life. You remember more of the good things than you do of bad things. Mm-hmm. That's because over time, your subconscious modifies your dreams. That's why you want to get, if you're in an investigation, you want to get there on the scene immediately before people start to change their story. And they change their story not because they're being malicious. It's just that their brain hasn't had time to work on that story yet. Yeah. So what happens over time, people lose many of the bad memories and they only remember the good things, which is why you hear the expression all the time, oh, the good old days, and why the Bible tells us not to go back and put much weight and say, I wish they were the good old days again, because they weren't the good old days and they never were the good old days. They were just a different time when different things were happening. Your mind has taken and insulated you from that.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful analysis. I think that is a large part of what's going on in the conservative Christian community that are politically aware. They are longing for something that never really was. And sadly, Greg and Suzanne, there's people willing to peddle that and make a lot of money on it. I mean, Limbaugh's contract, I think, was $400 for 10 years, $400 million for 10 years. So to peddle what?
Snake oil.
What?
Snake. That's exactly what I was going to say.
You are telling people what they want. We are giving away what you need. And the thing is, like you quote, Jesus said, the truth shall set you free. We are trying to give you the key to unlock these chains from you. These people are giving you a shiny little rag so you can polish your chains and feel good about yourself while wearing them. You can listen to them rant and rave about the Democrats. We're asking you to take a good hard look at your own parties. I have this. We're so complete, so happy to take whatever little victories come our way. Do you remember when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the baker in Colorado? Yay, victory for the First Amendment. Well, it might have been a victory for that one baker, but ultimately it was a loss for limited government and federalism. Again, the Supreme Court had no authority to rule on this case. What makes that decision even worse was Kennedy told them how to get it right next time. If you in Colorado side against this baker, you have to do it in a way that appears, wink, wink, to be neutral towards religion. So what he told them is do it right next time, and we will grant you an Obergefell version for caterers across this United States of America. Conservatives were cheering. And here I am saying, no, this is no victory. This is not a victory for anybody. No First Amendment rights. There's no such thing. My dad has a koi pond. And when you come up, I see these fish. I watch them. When this tall looming figure approaches the pond, all the fish get excited and they swirl around. And you throw them these little scraps of their fish food, this processed garbage that no fish in the real world would ever consider eating, but it's handed to them and they're grateful for it. And then they even some of these land on the lily pads. These fish venture out from the water to get these scraps. Where is the most dangerous place a fish can be? Where it can't breathe. folks, we got to stop being coy, literally.
Yes,
and start staying in the water where we can survive. The depths, we need to think and bring these ideas up from the depths and stop getting excited when the overlords approach our little pond. We need to be sharks. Stop being koi fish.
Yes.
People have time I go out there.
Once people have reached the limit of their chain, they identify the fact that they're actually slaves. If they never actually get to pull that chain taut, they still believe that they have every single freedom that was ever written about them, from the Magna Carta all the way through last week's Supreme Court legislation. So, and I also believe that when you talk about people understanding freedom, what it really is, what you're talking about is becoming actually free. People don't want freedom. And this is a conclusion I came to over a number of years. People in America will pay for anything that they can get for free. So they typically don't necessarily want freedom because they don't understand what the concept is, number one. And number two, they don't want the responsibilities of freedom. They prefer to have the responsibilities passed off, just like state legislatures will pass off responsibility to the federal legislators, who pass off responsibility to the executive, who has a huge, huge staff now. Never intended to be that way, but that's just how things happen because nobody wants to do their job. Nobody wants to be held responsible for their job.
No, you're exactly right. There's no disputing anything we're saying here, folks. And actually, you can't dispute the things we're saying. And the antidote to this idea of freedom is actually freedom. Now, most societies organize under some kind of economic theory. That's really how we function. Now, an economic theory backed up by immoral ideas will lead to no freedom at all. You'll work for the man. Economic theories that are backed up by moral ideas will cause you to realize the value of work and production and serving your fellow man. We as conservative, well, I shouldn't even say myself, I'm not a conservative anymore. I'm now identifying myself as an unalienable rightist. So that's what.
Mark, let me share a comment from our listener, Michael. We don't have the phones working right now, but I love when the listeners can still chime in. You can send it to the fan page. You could send it to me personally or any of us. But here's what he says. Limbaugh and Hannity are like preachers at mega churches who have not read the Constitution, just give talking points and generalities, never giving actual meat. And that really is true here. And Jeff just sent a message in our private chat here also. Remember when we had our tax cut? And President Trump said, this is a wonderful gift to the American people. When somebody steals something from you and gives a little bit of it back and calls it a gift, that's insulting. I'm sorry, that's an insult. So here we go now. President Trump tried Wednesday to persuade his fellow Republicans to raise the gas tax. Whoa, back up the truck. I thought we were all about cutting back taxes.
Yeah.
At a closed-door meeting on infrastructure, with members of both parties, Trump pitched the idea of a 25-cent increase in the gas tax, which hasn't been raised since 1993. There is a growing rift among Republicans about whether it's worth considering a tax hike to fund much-needed upgrades to America's roads and bridges. Remember James Madison's bank bonus bill veto? He wanted to have a percentage of the United States Bank's profits used for infrastructure or roads. Well, he said, we need to do this. So Congress passes a law, and when it comes to his desk, he vetoes it. He was in favor of this bill, but he said, wait a minute, we need a constitutional amendment. I asked you to do this first, you big dummies. And they didn't do it. They just said, well, we're going to do this anyway. Why? And this has been since the beginning of time. It's too difficult to get a constitutional amendment. Yes, we have had amendments, 27 of them, but how many more do we need to support the programs we have? Going back to the Louisiana Purchase, even Madison, who was in favor of it, remember Dave Benner's article, we disagreed on this. He felt, and you and I discussed this, that under the treaty powers, they could do this. But even Madison argued expediency. Did the founders ever anticipate an addition of territory so vast to this continental landmass that it would fundamentally transform representation in this newly created government? So while we said perhaps it follows along the letter of the Constitution, definitely not the spirit. And that's what we have to think of.
See, and you're making a case exactly why I moved past the Constitution for solutions. It doesn't have any. They just do what they want to do. This thing really came apart when we started the westward expansion because it's too small to govern that much territory. It's stupid. It's a stupid idea. It really is dumb, folks, to think 545 megalomaniacs can govern all this territory and 320 million people. It's just a dumb idea. It's so fine. Let's just admit it's a dumb idea and think, okay, well, what's a smarter idea? How about we do that? How about we actually believe in free markets rather than just talk a good game about free markets? It goes back to my point earlier. Societies organize themselves around economies. Now, conservatives claim, all for free markets. Until, like Greg was alluding to, you actually have to produce in one. You actually have to work in one. Oh, no. Well, then I don't want to do that. I like the idea of free markets. I never said I actually wanted to participate in one. Folks, free markets are the answers to everything. Free markets fully embraced is why you don't need big government. It truly is. Now, what? Kreslin, my roads. How are we going to build my roads?
You big dummy.
You big dummy. How are we going to educate our kids?
Don't you realize that the roads are overbuilt already? How many people need? And for example, I just had my road to the house here from the main road resurfaced. It looks amazing. This is the greatest road in the history of roads. And for the 3.5 miles that it covers, with the little tributaries that go off on the side all the way down to where I'm at, which they resurfaced, we had a total of 2 potholes. This required resurfacing of 3.5 miles. This required us gaining new double yellow lines down the almost unused road.
Don't you dare cross those. Don't.
My query, I know my own surveillance stuff will end me in jail, right? My query to the state Uber gods went unanswered on only 6 occasions. The 7th occasion, I did receive a note back where they thanked me for my interest in the roads, and that they wanted to be sure that I knew that they were looking out for my interests. My interest would have been to save the $632,000 that they had applied to this and purchased about $25 in tar and blacktop and just patched the potholes.
Hey, call Domino's because there's
right.
potholes.
This household will never send a telephone message to a Domino's ever. Not because they're bad people. It's because we're from Brooklyn. That Brooklyn pizza is not Brooklyn pizza. I appreciate they pour some olive oil on the top of it so it drips off, but it ain't there.
You mentioned
and the second thing is, I just want to jump in real quick. Trying to get airtime with a lawyer on here, folks, is tough sometimes.
So hard. It's painful. Back in the 80s, I don't know if you remember, one of those televangelists, Peter Popoff.
Oh gosh, yes. He
was a super awesome natural faith healer guy.
Charlatan.
Yeah, well, give or take a lot. Yeah, he was born in Germany and he learned a bunch about Americanism. Came here, loves the American style. The snake oil salesman thing. In 1986, he was outed by the amazing Randy, if you might remember.
I
James
remember it all.
Randi. Yes, and who went into the establishment there. I'll call it a church because the people who went there believed it was a church. And he went in there and he collected all the radio signals, and he found that Peter Popoff had an earpiece in his ear, and his wife was reading from all the prayer requests, everything about the people that were coming in there. This is what you get when you turn on Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity.
Yes.
You get exactly what you've put into the system is getting regurgitated back out to you, and you like it so much because it was your idea in the first place.
That's a great point. That's great.
I just want to say here real quick, because everything that is being said here, there is not a script. We are not we don't have writers sitting there, which would be me, because I'm not sitting here writing a script that they have to read. Unlike the one we're talking about, Rush Limbaugh, maybe not. He may be doing it ad lib. I don't know, but I know that Sean Hannity goes off a script. There are writers sitting there telling him what he's going to do in his show. This is all us. It is all coming. Well, I hate to say it's coming from this brain.
There goes everybody.
Greg Green. I have so many ideas. It pushed our hair
off. So that explains it, Jeff. Now I understand the bald head.
Well, for me.
Well, maybe it's going to be fine for you, too.
I've got no brain matter pushing this forward.
Right.
I
hear a scarecrow coming on with a song.
Mark, earlier you mentioned how they never intended, as we are occupying this continental landmass, manifest destiny, we have, going back to the Don Livingston's introduction and rethinking this American Union for the 21st century, he quotes Aristotle, where an entity can either be too small or too large, at which point it ceases to be functional. When something ceases to be functional, and this goes, finally, we're getting to the topic of the show, civility. We have lost all civility. Yes, we had contention before, but we are in an era now where we are seeing the actual politicians cheer on violence. And this started, I remember when Obama was inaugurated and then he appointed Eric Holder. Said, we're a nation of cowards because we're not talking about race. It seemed to me we were getting along pretty well up till then. But again, if you stoke the fires of discontent, malcontent, and anger, it can be a distraction from the actual harm that fundamentally transforming America can do. So what did we start seeing? We started seeing the flash mobs, the knockout game. Now that they've lost an election, they were so sure Hillary was going to win. We have Tim Kaine. We need to take it to the streets. What happened shortly after that? We had
when Ike beat Tina.
We had a Congressman, Pete Scalise, shot for no other reason than being a Republican. The shooter says, "Are those Republicans down there?" Yes, he sends it. We have Maxine Waters. You need to confront pro-Trump people. Ted Cruz was confronted. Sarah Sanders. Look what's happening to these people. We're seeing kids with hats taken off, being assaulted. The violence during the election cycle at Trump rallies. Police are standing by. They're not doing anything about it. The mayor, look at, after the show, go and check out the protests going on in Portland, Oregon. White senior citizens are being accosted, blocked in the street as they're trying to drive down the roads, their vehicles vandalized for no other reason than being white and being in Portland. These people have been so indoctrinated, the hatred. What were some of the other ones? We had Maxine Waters, Hillary Clinton. We can remain, the time for civility is gone. If we get the House back, we can be civil. Now, one of the articles is saying she's calling for a civil war. I don't interpret it that when she's calling about civility being restored when they get the House. These people are so interested in firing up their followers. We're seeing the violence, but we're so distracted. We're not seeing this for what it is. At what point are we going to recognize that these people are accepting of hurting us in the street if they don't like what we have to say? We saw in Canada, a guy had a Trump sticker on his truck. It was torched. A woman received a roundhouse kick to the shoulders for having a conversation about trying to save a baby's life. These people are so full of hate. If you try to defend the unborn, they will assault you. So where do we go from here, Mark?
Well, this is everything I am doing now. What you just described. I don't make constitutional arguments anymore. I don't make anything that distracts people from what the real solution is. And the real solution really is not that complicated. It's really found in the Declaration of Independence. We need to go back and read this because, as we were talking before the show began, there's a revolution going on right now, right in our midst, right in front of us. You just listed off a number of revolutionaries who are using
a Bolshevik revolution. Right. This is scary.
Then they're using revolutionary language. Revolutions require revolutionary language. Now, not all revolutions have to be violent. Marxist-Leninism seems to be, that's their choice. They prefer violent revolutions at some point, but they're very clever. They always build the foundation first. They're very smart people we're up against. We seem to be in Rush Limbaugh land, but they're very smart, very deliberate, very calculating in how they build the foundation. So what did they do? Let's just, let's begin with the question. And I'll give you guys time to think about it in the audience while we're discussing some realities of this. List for me, send Suzanne a message, the top 10 conservative policy victories in your lifetime. In your lifetime. Now, you should, if there's that many, you should be able to list them off. Now, if I asked a
Medicaid Part D.
if I asked a modern day progressive Marxist to list off to the top 10 victories they achieved, you know what they would say? Well, back in the 60s and 70s, we launched the Great Society programs, the War on Poverty. In 1973, we advanced women's rights by allowing them to legally murder their children. We created the Department of Energy and the Department of Education to govern our resources, including our children. We passed Obamacare. We passed hate crime legislation and anti-discrimination legislation.
We went off the gold standard. Oh, wait.
We went off the gold standard. We went to fiat currency. Yeah. Folks, I'm telling you, they could list 1,000 victories that they've had. And you can't list 10. You could, I asked this question on my Facebook page the other day. Somebody listed one, and it was only a kind of a victory. One. You know what it was? We repealed the individual mandate in Obamacare. Oh, well, that's right up there with Great Society programs. Folks, they have been building this for 50, 60 years. They are now at a point where they feel comfortable becoming more violent, to put in a couple of things, to do a couple of things, to begin to create cultural confusion. Now they're attacking all sorts of institutions right now. I posted an article today that there's a new move afoot to legitimize pedophilia. They want to change the definition of the term. Now that's normalization, but we saw the precursor to that 3 years ago with we need to let LGBTQ, all these people, into women's bathrooms or male bathrooms.
Mark, let's go back further. There was a time when homosexuality was considered a mental disorder. Mm-hmm. But you give enough money to the Democrat Party, and what was once a disorder now becomes something that we need to accept. And this is a very slippery slope. I personally don't have I stay out of that battle.
I do too, but it's important.
What I do say is the pride movement is subversive to liberty. Because then what they do is try to take our rights of free association and property away from us. And then we have the massive redistribution of wealth as we get to the transgender issue now that we are having to pay for their treatment, for their surgeries, their hormones, everything else. We're seeing all of a sudden the people that are so concerned with the rape and assault culture are demanding that men be allowed in women's restrooms. Again, this isn't about their ideas other than complete and total domination politically and culturally.
And that's all Marxist-Leninism ever does. It's total domination. So they create, number one, cultural confusion. They have many different angles. They're firing at many different cylinders out there. And so there's this sense of confusion. You don't really know how to respond to every issue. You don't want to be seen as a prude. You get embarrassed to say what Suzanne just said, and so you don't say anything. And they create a sense of confusion. They've been wonderful at this in the last few decades. Next step for them is to move to intimidation kinds of tactics. Now, they are doing that right now. You know what? You guys have probably seen this on your pages as well. I have seen now at least 20 memes that say, when was the last time you ever saw a conservative react violently in the streets? Now, it doesn't matter whether we've done it, that's ever happened before. What is the person saying there? We're not going to be like them, because that's not what well-meaning, good citizen conservatives do. No, what we do is we roll over and let them do what they're doing. And then we get intimidated and we don't do anything. So we sit back and we say, well, we puff our chest and say, we're not going to be like them. Now, I want to jump into something real quick, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because I don't think most people can handle this right now. You go back to 1770, go back to the 1750s and 60s leading up to 76. And you begin to look at the Sons of Liberty. Now, we love the Sons of Liberty. Yeah, they were the guys that really stoked the move for independence in Boston and in a few other places. Well, look at some of their acts. Now, on July 4th, we love flipping hamburgers and turning hot dogs and watching those fireworks go up because of their actions back in 1750, 60, all the way up to 76. These guys were rabble-rousers. They did a lot of things to get us free. Now, they were revolutionaries. They used revolutionary language. Martin Luther King is a revolutionary. He met with groups of people before they crossed the Selma Bridge and said, who is ready to be bitten by a dog? Who's ready to take a hosing? Who's ready to take a beating? Only be involved in this if you're ready to peacefully be the oppressed. Now, these Marxist-Leninists, they are on the streets right now, and they are intimidating people. And so far, there's been no response, no organized response other than to say, well, we're not like them.
We're going to let our politicians handle it, and we're going to vote.
Yeah.
And this is what I told the ladies over the lunch. We are in, as you say all the time, this ridiculous pattern of voting, hoping, and coping. Okay, let's vote for these midterm elections. And then we're going to hope they do the right thing, just like we're going to hope Kavanaugh does the right thing. And then we're going to cope when they do. And then we're going to start all again.
You make me laugh so funny. So here's some of the biggest wins. You want to talk about the big? I pulled up a list just because I could. The top 20 biggest conservative wins ever. It starts with number 20 as winning the Spanish-American War. So I jumped off of that list real quick because I could tell it was chock full of like really good stuff. And I went over to a place that I figured would have a good list, which was townhall.com.
Yeah.
I was going to be wicked.
Easy there, hero. And they have the 7 biggest conservative wins of 2017. Number 1, judicial picks.
Yeah.
So I didn't laugh at you when you said hello to the people.
I'm sorry.
Mark.
I'm sorry.
I expect the lawyer to laugh. Number 2 biggest conservative win was pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Number 3, significant blows to ISIS. who we created, which is
exactly
hysterical to me. It's like we've defeated a group of ragtag. Just and on the side, if I could, we're doing so great prosecuting the war on terrorism, yada yada yada. We made most of the terrorist groups. We financed them, funded them, trained them, that are really so problematic for us now. How are we ever going to stand up to a international power like Latvia or Lithuania if we can't beat a ragtag group of terrorists roaming around in the desert on camels? I digress. It's taken us almost 20 years to do this now. National concealed carry reciprocity passed in the House.
Oh, my word.
And wait, these are victories, Mark. You're not, come on, you don't sound like Limbaugh. See? Formally recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Thank God, finally.
And I tell you, okay, tax reform and
25-cent tax. 25-cent tax on gas is going to eat up our little Christmas present.
You're killing me, Suzanne. And the number one conservative victory of 2017 is the economic uptick.
Oh,
this is what Levin and Limbaugh and Hannity, oh my, have hung their hats on. This is what they talk. I mean, this is what they talk about. So they're being fed stuff from townhall.com, obviously, or they're feeding it to townhall.com. But when you have insider information like these guys do, they know what they're going to talk about. They know what information they're going to put out. Just like the left-wing media, these guys are doing the same thing on the right side. It happens on both sides. You get hit with propaganda on both sides, which is evidenced by the top 7 on townhall.com. And of course, don't forget, Spanish-American War still in there as one of the top 20 conservative victories.
Yeah, I feel like we should have party hats on when you're reading those.
I feel obligated to wear my party hat.
And here Rand Paul even
Which
said,
party is it, the Republican or the Democrat party hat?
No kidding.
Exactly. Rand Paul, remember, he was assaulted. A United States senator, the neighbor, by his neighbor, felt so comfortable in his hate, he could go and physically assault and break the ribs of the United States Senator. Rand Paul said somebody is going to get killed. Somebody has. People are being killed.
Senator Sumter was assaulted.
Yeah. And folks, this is really an important part. This is why what we do here at Cerberus Radio Network is so important. We're bringing you truth. So right now, you can open the newspapers and confirm everything we're talking about. There is violence going on. Now, what is my revolutionary, what I think in the folks here on the show with me, what are our revolutionary ideas? State sovereignty, secession. Sadly, those should not be revolutionary ideas because they're in our history.
And they're constitutional.
They're in our form. And I don't care about the Constitution. Their Declaration of Independency.
Right. But for the people that have to have that thing to believe.
Indispensable.
I tell them, we can do this within the parameters. Remember now, one of the ladies said, and I hear this all the time, I'm a pragmatist. We have to work within the constraints. So I looked up, because I like to go to dictionary.com. Where do people go when they try to understand things? A pragmatist is somebody who believes in something and wants to work towards a belief or specific goal within those parameters. And a realist, and I said, well, that's fine. I'm a realist. On the other hand, we see things as they truly are, which is what we've been talking about this hour on our show. And we understand that working within the parameters accepted by the pragmatists will yield absolutely no change.
Nothing.
When I said this is akin to sitting in a rocking chair and rocking all day, it gives you something to do, but you're not going to go anywhere. So reaching across the aisle, what has that gotten? We just listed our victories. They were very, very hollow indeed, weren't they?
Yes. And this is really an important, I love the analogy, the imagery there of sitting in a rocking chair and just rocking, but going nowhere. That is what people who believe there are constitutional solutions do. Folks, the Constitution is part of the problem because it doesn't matter if we were even able to get back under it, supposedly. It would just get re-abused again. It is a model for expansion, as it's currently written, of government. It's just written that way. So I look for new ideas, new ways forward. Now, fortunately, in our history, I can go backwards and see a new way forward. I recognize it sounds like an oxymoron. How do you do that? Well, you go back to the foundational governing principles in the Declaration of Independence. Governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. You know you don't consent to what's going on. You don't consent to these progressive Marxist leftists out there running around beating up people. You know you don't consent to any of that. And you know that this has really been a very effective tool of the Marxist-Leninist progressives to use government to accomplish their goals. So what do? You don't think you're smart enough to use government like they did and get conservative victories. Greg just listed, and Suzanne used exact word. Those are 7 hollow victories. They're not victories. They're in substance at all. They're just laughable ideas that we want to say, well, look at what we've done. Well, look, I just strung off the top of my head 15 or so progressive victories, and they actually mean something. They actually do something. You want to talk about no-fault divorce? Oh, that's been great for marriage in the country, hasn't it? You want to talk about fatherless homes? Oh, guess what stinking entity did that under the Constitution? Folks, free your minds from that. Think forward. Think new. Don't get stuck in the old. Jesus, when he came to the Pharisees, said something very interesting about them, and it's obviously has spiritual implications, but there's an underlying principle there. The God of the universe said, you cannot pour new wine into old wineskins because the old wineskins explode. They can't handle it. You must pour new wine into new wineskins. That's what we're about here in the Cerberus Radio Network. We're new wine being poured into new wineskin. I follow another radio show, Shannon Joy, and she's up in New York. She's got a small little network up there. And I texted her the other day. I said, Shannon, keep doing what you're doing. You are new wine pouring into new wineskin, because she's challenging all of the underlying assumptions we're supposed to embrace about the GOP and about conservative ideology. There's more of us out there than you think. What we need to do now is be as organized as the progressive Marxist leftists are, move towards state sovereignty and towards confederation. I do not want to federate again, ever. I do not want a strong central government, ever. I don't want a weak central government. I want regional governments based on cultural distinctives that are in this country. We are, Greg, you know New York. Suzanne, you know California. I know Maryland, and now I know Oklahoma. Culturally, we are wild. And Jeff, poor Jeff, he's stuck in Pennsylvania. We are wildly different culturally than each other. I don't want a central government trying to make us a monolithic government. You know, Marshall DeRosa, Professor DeRosa once told me, and I think he's totally right on this, the only way you can have government is in a homogeneous society. And that means everybody's the same. That's the only time you can have government, because then they will all agree on the kind of government they end up with. If you are in a heterogeneous society where there's multiple views of views and beliefs, do not have government. It is a horrible idea, because one of those groups will get a hold of it and wreck the other beliefs. Well, we are not a homogeneous society in hashtag this exceptional union. We are a heterogeneous society. And what do? Oh, let's create one central government to make us all do the same thing.
And let's all unite as Americans.
Yeah, let's claim we're united, right?
Only way we can do that is if we capitulate to this huge
power.
Leviathan. And that's the only way. And the bigger the population becomes, the more draconian the government has to become by necessity to control us. They can't be limited. Remember, John Dingell, during the healthcare debates, the ACA debates, said, 90-year-old representative, Democrat representative out of Michigan, we need healthcare act and reform so we can control the people. His wranglers immediately rolled back that same, he misspoke. When a politician is accused of a misspeaking, it means he said the truth. The more people we have, The bigger this government, look at China, look at all those people, and look how they have them controlled. That's not freedom at all. And you just have to understand, when I bring up these concepts of decentralized governments like Switzerland, I had a response. Nobody cares about Switzerland. Precisely. Yeah. That's my point.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Is the world better off for us being so powerful? Let me ask you a question too, guys. What about when the Soviet Union disbanded? Did China invade them? Did we invade them?
So
we know faith by rolling up our missiles to their border. But what happened? Nothing.
Nothing happened. Right. Nothing happened. That's right. A whole bunch of nothing.
There
was no severed head of a man in a bag behind a bush, a man in his late 30s. There was nothing to be found on the way into the office the next day. I went back to townhall.com. I thought this was funny because those were the conservative victories of last year. Then I found the Republican victories of all times.
Oh, boy.
And you tell me just which of these is actually conservative or means anything. Condoleezza Rice becomes Secretary of State.
Okay.
Retaliation in Afghanistan. Doesn't sound conservative to me. Republicans balanced the budget in 98. Welfare reform in 96. The Gulf War. The collapse of the Soviet Union. The Reagan tax cuts. The Civil Rights Act of 1960. First Asian American U.S. Senator. Desegregation of schools. Why? How? By deploying the 82nd Airborne Division into Arkansas. The interstate highway system.
Let freedom ring, baby.
It's ringing. Now, here's a Republican victory. Jackie Robinson became the first black player in America to play in the American leagues. So that's a Republican victory on the list. Jesse Owens winning 4 gold medals in the Olympics. That's a Republican victory somehow. Construction of the Hoover Dam, spending money we don't have to do stuff. I think that was the one fault that I have to find with Calvin Coolidge, is that he signed that doggone law. The first woman elected to the House of Representatives back in 1916. Construction of the Panama Canal. Victory in the Spanish-American War. I told you it was there. Women's right to vote. End of the Civil War. We started the Civil War. What are you talking about? And the Emancipation Proclamation. These are the top 20 Republican victories since the party formed.
Oh, and by the way, if you're a slave in a state loyal to this holy union, that doesn't apply to you. Just forget what you said.
I had to bring that point up to my daughter's socialist studies teacher. The teacher, she went on to, try to screw me on the Emancipation Proclamation. Yeah. And I had to go back and explain to her that no, the slaves that lived in New Jersey were still slaves until December 11th, 1865, when the 13th Amendment was passed.
As were the ones in New Orleans under federal control.
Federal control, sure.
I dropped these truth bombs at lunch, and one woman just said to me, I was feeling so positive and so good about things. You showed up.
Well, my daughter was sitting there, and she looks at me, and she gives me, that little baby on the meme you see with the fish clenched going, yeah. That was my daughter. My 13-year-old daughter at the time. She's like, you're rocking, Dad.
Like, my guess is that's what happened to a lot of people in the audience today. And that's good. You need to be shaken out of your slumber, your comfort. You need to be thinking about these problems. What Greg just read off, we are pikers compared to what the Marxist-Leninists have right now. They're not doing, they actually have. They're building on it. Folks, time is short. You better be able to think clearly about solutions going forward. There are 14 states that I've identified that need to secede from the Union. They need to form a confederation. They need to get on their own and away from Washington that is under the control of Marxist-Leninists right now. If you don't believe me, then go ahead and keep listening to Limbaugh and enjoy your shackles when they come. They are coming, folks. Look what's going on in China right now, the crackdown on evangelical Christians there. There is a massive move afoot to squash out Christianity. Marxist-Leninism and Christianity are totally incompatible ideas. You need to side with one. And if you're a Christian, you know who you need to side with. And it ain't Leninism.
By the way, California would all of a sudden really embrace secession and nullification if Utah had the political clout that they do. If we had the political clout that California, New York, these other big states do, we would be talking decentralization. They would be talking decentralization. We're out of time. I want to thank everybody. Mark, thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you.
Greg Carpenter. Check out his recordings. His show's Liberty Minutes, The Spy Who Loved Liberty. I omitted putting that in our list earlier, but they are on Radio Co. You can hear those. We're out of time. Thank you, Jeff Johnson, for producing the show. This has been the Mark and Suzanne Show, revolutionizing radio here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, interesting. Mark, Jeff said it ended, even though it shows live.
Oh, okay. It shows live for me too.
Yeah, it shows live for me too. Okay.
What did you say, Greg?
It still shows live for us, Jeff.
Oh, does it? Well, I'm trying to get back in right now. Is what I'm trying to do.
Oh, way to go! Now you did it. You broke the internet. There he is.